Now, I'd like to introduce to you our presenter this evening, Joe. Joe Minicozzi is an urban planner who imagines new ways to think about urban design and economics. He is the principal of Urban 3, a consulting firm that specializes in helping communities understand the financial implications of land use. He is also a founding member of the Asheville Design Center, a nonprofit community design center dedicated to creating livable communities across all of Western North Carolina. If you wouldn't mind, please put your hands together to welcome Joe Minicozzi. Thanks, Joe.
Y'all know Asheville? Or I'm sure you've seen what we went through over this fall. It was as biblical as it looked on TV. Asheville is up in the mountains of Western North Carolina. It's part of the Blue Ridge Mountain area. Home of bluegrass music, beer. We have 40 breweries. We're only 95,000 people. We drink a lot. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's your typical little place. I'm joking. Also, I wanted to make it a little bit more relevant for you all, so I got a little Texas with this. So to make it easier for you, we are in the barbecue zone. We're sort of we're on the pig side of the pig-cow line, and somewhere on that we straddle the tomato vinegar border. We're definitely not the weirdo mustard barbecue people, and we're not the mutton barbecue people. So I hope that y'all know that what we are, so you feel us. Asheville sort of fell apart in the early 1900s, and we basically boarded up our downtown once the mall hit the outside of the city. These are shots of downtown Asheville. So you didn't visit this Asheville. And we essentially just said, this isn't who we are. We just boarded up our town and walked away from these buildings. I worked for a real estate developer. His name is Julian Price. He's a philanthropist. And we did a for-profit real estate development model, fixing buildings, starting businesses, but we also had a social bent in our work. Could you do the right thing and make money was the goal. So this is one of our buildings before and after. We just basically put apartments in it and created housing for folks. But we also found ourselves constantly trying to communicate to people that we're real estate developers, and apparently all developers are evil. So we're trying to explain why we were helping our community. And we did it through data. What's the data that's going on in your community? So I'll give you an example of this. Also, the reason why we're a $25 million real estate development company, but what's the city, right? If you look up the word incorporate in Oxford American Dictionary, it says to constitute a company, a city, or other organization is a corporation. So the city of San Antonio is incorporated, right? We have a board of directors member here in the audience. Your county is incorporated. The state of Texas is incorporated, and so is the United States. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. And I'm such a nerd, I looked it up. For any legal nerds in the audience, there's the US code on the bottom of the slide if you want to look it up. So this is who we are. This is how we operate. There's a cash flow in how we build cities and what it means. So my city is $14 billion of taxable real estate. So my board of directors, my mayor, and my city council are worth 7 times more than Ted Turner. Is Ted Turner just making comments and deciding based on what's on Facebook? Of course not. That's not how we should be making decisions. We at least understand what's going on with the data. Take that input on Facebook, but you should look at the numbers. So the city is essentially a finite boundary of land that has to be managed. That acreage, like Bexar County can't annex the next county over, right? Those acres are it. And y'all are shareholders in that corporation. So to give you an idea of the way that I talk about real estate is kind of similar to the way a farmer talks about land. Farmers are always talking about economics, the water per acre, labor per acre, things like that. So this is one of our buildings. The city did the streetscape project. So thank you, city, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree. That's awesome. We were actually accused of being subsidized by people. And we're like, really? Like the whole world can walk on that, but fine. We put in retail at the ground floor, office on the second floor, and residential above it. We took the taxable value from $300,000 to $11 million. That represents an increase in taxes of 3,500%. Y'all get 3,500% more money out of this building. Go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. And this is about building our community's wealth, growing wealth for our community on an asset that's just sitting there. And again, there's people with their biases. People said to me like, well, Joe, that's $11 million. This Walmart is $20 million. Fair enough. But it took 34 acres of our farm to make that Walmart happen versus our 0.2 acres. When you use gross numbers, you're missing what it means to sacrifice our land in our community. By the way, I'll have this whole thing as a PDF copy so that you all can take it. I know I'm going through a lot of slides. But on a per acre basis, we're producing 100 times more property taxes in our building versus the Walmart on a per acre basis. Double the sales tax, a lot more residents, obviously, and more jobs. So why is it you're supporting the thing on the left versus the thing on the right? Why is it easier to do the thing on the left than the thing on the right? It doesn't mean that more stuff for our community, right? So this isn't complex math that I'm doing here. This is fifth grade division. Let's put it a different way. Could you imagine if I was saying I get a truck that gets 650 miles per tank? You'd laugh at me. You're like, Joe, all tanks are different sizes. We say miles per gallon, and the numbers just changed. And we should all be driving BMW Asettas at 70 miles per gallon, right? We know that about the commodity of gasoline. Why don't we know this about land? And this land is all that we have. There's only one planet, right? I would argue that people don't see this because of the way that we talk about numbers. We tend to fear numbers. So how do you do this in a different way? So if I can show you your brain with your brainstem activity in blue versus your creative thought process in green, can I do an economic MRI of your place? By the way, I know Eddie's here from Centro. I was on the Downtown Association for our community. I'm not making this up. Our state representative called my city a cesspool of sin. And it's political. We're in the Downtown Association. We're like, maybe he didn't really mean it. And he doubled down and says, well, it's not this city part or the county people. It's just that city. Actually, it's the downtown. That's where the freaks and weirdos are. That's the cesspool. So I was in charge of a Downtown Association presentation, and I did this. This is my county. You can see what's gray are parks, right? Non-taxable. Green is low value. Purple is high value. See the Biltmore estate. That's America's largest house. That one house is worth $100 million. Super cool, right? But that's not fair because it's a 180,000 square foot house sitting on an 8,000 acres of land. It's the biggest gas tank, right? So rather than total value, here's value per acre. And let me just show it to you in 3D. Can y'all tell me where downtown might possibly be? So I was presenting this and I said, for y'all out in the county, people out in Fairview who are part of the people that were calling us a cesspool, you don't know what we're producing in county taxes. So rather than hate on us, how about a thank you card every once in a while? Send us a box of chocolates, come on. We're all county taxpayers. So we're all related in this. We're all part of this family called Buncombe County. So doing your analysis, I'll just kind of get into this. You're a different state, you have different taxes. So in North Carolina, we have a straight tax system. We don't have a homestead exemption or a cap. It's just your tax value is your market value. I'll come back to that in a second in the latter part of the show. But you all have this cap. And the way that the cap works, if you have $300,000 of value, commercial or residential, basically there's your tax rate. You have different tax rates for different parts of your community. We're grabbing San Antonio here, just to give you the relative tax bill between commercial and residential. Now you can't have that exemption if you're in a commercial property. So let's go through the exemptions real quick. So the residential exemption at $300,000, or your cap down to your previous purchase is the prior year market rate, and you choose the lower of the two. I know this looks complicated, and it is. We're trying to make it as simple as possible, but basically, they let you take the lower one. Now, for any homestead exemption people in here that have the homestead exemption, count your lucky stars. Any renters in the room? You get any homestead exemption in the renters? No. How is that fair? Just wondering. Anyway, so not only do you get that protection as a homeowner, you've been given that get out of jail free card from a taxation standpoint, you get to pay less taxes, which turns into $5,000 versus $7,000. So just so you know, it's y'all adopted it, you voted for it or whatever. It's part of your policies. Just be aware of how it operates. So non-homestead pays 1.27 times more taxes than homestead people in this example. So the other thing is, over time, you have this kind of cap system that this is your tax system that the county has, and then over time you can start to see this discount that happens in the model. So for the folks that have to run government, does the price of running the government follow those same procedures? No. So you create caps on your revenue, you don't have caps on your costs. So just be aware of that. So when you have these discounts, it's really hard for somebody to try to balance a budget when there's an incentive you basically want to get more people to move to town so you can afford to have new taxes or get more renters, basically, or commercial property. You're not alone in this. There's a lot of states that did this. The first one was California in 1978. I don't know if y'all know that, Prop 13. It spread like a sort of a wildfire around the community. I just want to go through Florida real quick because Florida is way more insane than y'all. So everybody knows that Florida's a little crazy, but Florida caps commercial at 10% and residential at 3%, or CPI, which is ever lower of the two. Okay, so this is the budget of a government. In blue is where the market is, in red is where the cap is. So notice how they go through the recession, the market drops and comes back, but look at how slow it climbs back out at the end of the recession. Their cap is way worse than yours. They cap it at CPI or inflation, which is ever lower of the two. So I'll give you an example. Last year, or 2022, inflation was at 7%, and they capped themselves down to 3%. So over time, this is the cost of a road. So over the last 10 years, roads have gone at 5% growth, and they've capped themselves down to 3%. Worse, and this is something y'all feel here in Texas, the price of asphalt from 2021 to 2022 grew by 30% in 1 year. Does your cap help you here? So just be aware that when you drive on these crappy roads in your community, which they are in pretty bad shape, there's a reason why your community can't afford to keep up with them. These costs and policy decisions have ramifications. So this is as old as America. I don't know if you know, there's an old colonial barb that we used to say as colonists: don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax the fella behind the tree. Oops, sorry. Seriously, I'm not making this up. This is a true statement. So we started a Tea Party revolt because of what? Taxation. So this is who we are as Americans. I get it. But we as citizens need to be aware of this consequence. I'm not going to go through your budget stuff. We have it. We put some of the stuff on the map. We've got your budget and your expenses for your community. I'm just going to fly through these parts because this is better as a PDF. But this is the flow of your money, how it comes in to your general fund, and then where it gets spent. So we have this for you. You can take a look at it. It's better to not see it up here. So here's your county in total value. So you see the big parcels are super valuable because they're big. So let's go from total value to value per acre. You see that shift. Here it is in 3D. This model is insane because you have one property way the heck up here. The Canopy by Hilton is crushing it from a taxation standpoint. It's sort of bizarre. So let's kind of zoom into the model a little bit. So obviously you have a lot of heat in your downtown. We'll break down some of those pieces here in a second. And these are just the city inside the county. As a share of the county tax base, so all the citizens that are of the city of San Antonio, you take up about 54% of the county. You're producing 65% of the county's value. So as a shareholder of physical footprint to financial footprint, you're not positive to the county. Does that make sense? Do y'all follow me there? So the downtown is a portion of the city, is about 0.3% of the footprint. It's 2% of the value of the city. That's a 1-to-10 ratio. A good downtown is about a 1-to-6. So your downtown is really performing super strong from a valuation standpoint. Now, let's not forget that the downtown is a piece of the county too. So it's a 1-to-12 for the county. So what's good for the downtown is great for the city, but it's unbelievable for the county. Does Bexar County pay for a sidewalk project in downtown or a dog park? No. How many kids are being schooled in downtown? Not many. So you actually get a lot of return to the county out of your downtown. Sometimes when people see me do this presentation, they're like, you just want to see downtowns everywhere. And I'm like, no, you're missing the point. This is where your wealth is being produced. And you have to understand how it all works together. Does that make sense? So taxable, non-taxable. We made these maps. About 20% of your county's non-taxable. Your city's about 27%. There's no magic number here. We just wanted you to see these numbers. And let's get into one of my more weird things. I'm going to walk through this a little slow, but then show you your models. This is land value per acre in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So we just turned all the buildings off and just looked at the land value per acre. So if you can see this see the parcels under the label up here, how everybody's blue? So there's no buildings here. So this is just the land value per acre. It's all $15,000. That looks normal. We do this because we're looking for this stuff. Why is this so wildly different in this neighborhood for dirt on a per acre basis? There's no buildings here. Or more importantly, I was presenting this and I said, what's going on here where this is $15,000 an acre, and when you cross the street, it doubles in value to $40,000. How does the dirt double in value in the same zoning category? And the assessor was sitting in the front row, and she raises her hand and just yells out, "You don't understand." And I was like, what am I missing? And she goes, well, they have more land. The more land you have, the less people that can afford that large tract of land. So we have to give it a discount because there's less people that are in the market to buy that land. The mayor started laughing, and I just turned to her. I said, so I get more of your land and it's cheaper? Now, who can afford the larger tracts of land? It's not the smaller people, right? Does it work that way with other limited commodities? Like if I get a bigger diamond, is it cheaper? And everybody laughed. It's okay to laugh at this stuff. It's funny. This person has 3 miles of infrastructure. That person has 200 feet. And she goes, yeah, we don't count infrastructure as part of the valuation. That's not what how our assessment practices work. It's true. That's policy. Is that the policy you want? Is this how you're going to run your city? How arbitrary is that? By the way, I kept on asking her, where did this standard come from? She's like, I don't know. So I went to the assessors conference. I don't know if anybody hang out with an assessor. I know that there's some folks from the appraisal districts here. The assessors conference is the squarest conference I've ever been to. These people are super nerds, but their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. So I presented this to them, and they all laughed. And I said, how is this fair? And how is it equitable? To their credit, they're like, it's not. I'm like, where did this standard come from? Did Moses deliver this to you? Like, who gave this to you? And by the way, this joke kills them at the assessors conference. And they're like, no, we don't know where it came from. You should talk to Larry. I am not making this up. So I tracked this guy, Larry, down. And I'm wearing the same suit, by the way. But and I'm like, Larry, where did this come from? He's like, oh, it's probably something in agricultural purposes. Came from England, probably when we came over to the United States. We probably need to change that. That doesn't make sense. What? This is how the community runs, folks. You just have to find Larry. Anyway, so this is your land value model. You can see we're downtown. Your model is actually better than a lot of them that we see. But you can see how it cuts off, where the highway cuts off. And that's a lower wealth neighborhood, lower value. And then you see how it changes here. But you see patterns like this. So again, you can see how the highway is a huge barrier of value transference. You can see where your commercial corridors are. You can easily see where downtown is. And then look over here. So, or down here at Harlandale. So this is an example. The dirt under that house is, under that building is 600,000. The dirt under that is 1.2 million, and that dirt is 0.4. So that methodology of discount is actually working in some places in your community here too. And again, just ask questions about these policies. These are policies that some of which you have control over and some of which you don't. But the best maps to look at, I find, are these. And they're also useful tools. You can go back in and correct some of this. So this is showing you, why is this one parcel so much different from everything else around it? Just become more conversant with this stuff. But this is over at Denver Heights and down at Highland Park. So you have these 3 neighborhoods split by a highway again, with significant differences in the valuation. You have $700,000 as the value for the dirt in that part, 450 there, and 330,000 there. So this is all spatial analysis. I know this joke only works for certain people in the room. I'm sticking to it, sorry. So I've shown you maps. Let's just do a windshield survey of some of your communities. So this is your Walmarts. Everybody's got a Walmart, so we always use this as like your Big Mac index. Your Walmarts are pulling about $600,000 of value per acre. So compare that to residential, and for every slide going forward now, you'll see I'll just leave the Walmart on the lower left down here. But your single family residential is about $1 million. So your single family residential is actually more productive than a Walmart in property tax, just so you know. This is the estates is actually less value than your average residential at $200,000 of value per acre. It is what it is, just so you know. And then I don't know, for the zoning nerds in the room, there's this term of art called missing middle, which is the housing that we used to build before World War II, which is all this stuff in the middle there. So we grab these different categories. This is some of your missing middle stuff. So your duplexes, townhouses, but on average, they're pulling about 1.4 million an acre. Remember, the estates was 0.2. So this is more productive. And then you get into your multifamily. Now you're crushing it at like 1.5 million down to 35 million at the lower right there per acre. But on average, multifamily is 2.4 million. So this is the roll up. Lots of times I'll present in places and folks are they have biases and they'll say multifamily is bad for our community. And I'm like, well, it's paying more taxes and you also can't get a homeowner exemption in it. So to me, that's more productive, right? If you just look at the numbers. So just show a residential comparison. We grabbed Hill Country Village homes and Brookview duplexes, just to do an apples to apples comparison. The Hill Country Village homes are, 2 houses are on 10 acres. It's pulling $400,000 of value per acre. These are the duplexes on 5 acres. You have all of those houses in black on the right. So this is the value per acre. The duplexes are more productive than the Hill Country homes on a per acre basis of tax production. When you look at them from how many houses you can fit, so on 10 acres, you've got 2 houses. If you look at Brookview duplexes, you could essentially fit 2 of them on 10 acres or 120 houses versus 2. As you look at your land consumption, and again, these are choices. I want to have a big yard. I want to have a large house. There also comes with a lot more infrastructure with that. Does that make sense? So anyway, we just want to do that comparison. So that's $4 million on the left. On the right, you have $9 million. So not only is it more affordable, it's more tax productive on the same amount of land. Okay? Is this all too nerdy for a dinner conversation? Are you okay with this? Commercial, again, here's your Costco at $800,000. This is the La Cantera Mall at $2.4 million per acre. What's kind of cool about this one is right next door, we have these apartments at $15 million and $14 million. So again, it's how you use land has an effect financially to your community. The cheaper the building I make, again, some people think that I hate Walmart, totally missed the point. Walmart builds really cheap buildings. They consume a lot of real estate. There's a discount for doing that in the tax system. Don't hate the player, hate the game. You better understand the game to play it, right? So here's more, again, shopping centers are not that productive because there's a discount in how much you park it. The more parking you put, the lower the value. But then when you get to this stuff, look at this little building on the right at $28 million an acre of value versus La Cantera at 2. The stuff we used to build is super potent. Conversely, as a developer, why would I do that? Why would I spend more time and effort doing something downtown and then pay more taxes to hang on to that? It makes sense why you see suburban development take off the way that it does. There's tax incentives to do that. So 36 million, 38 million, and then it got obviously big buildings. Incidentally, look at the one in the middle. That's 40 million an acre. The one on the right is almost 40 million an acre. You don't have to be a tower to just be productive. And then this is the biggest one. This is the most potent thing. That's the top of the model at $200 million of value per acre, which is kind of insane. But it is what it is. This is the producer. One of the things I want you to remember here, besides the Alamo, is your great-grandparents and what they produced in your community. So these buildings have been with you for generations, producing potent wealth in your community. 12 million, 25 million, 10 million an acre across from the Alamo. This building here at 26 million, there it is. By the way, it's 3 Wemby's tall if you want to measure it, but it's been producing that value. Look at these old postcards. You had horses when you built some of these buildings, and some of them are still with you today, pulling 20 and 24 million an acre in value. Now, they always haven't been wonderful, but they've been able to come back. So there's a lesson in your history here with these buildings. Built in 1902, still with you, pulling 32 million. This one, the Emily Morgan's, pulling 86 million an acre. And it's just kind of insane. This one right now is 19 million, the Milan building. And then this one here, which is smaller than the Milan building, is pulling almost double the value at 50 million an acre. Again, this is just some snapshots around your community. And we just went ahead and grabbed around the Riverwalk area just to show what that core produces. And this is the footprint. These are some of the buildings inside the Riverwalk. And I understand it's a tourist area. It's a kind of a vein in the middle of your downtown. But there's a lot of value here. It's about 10 million, let's call it 11 million an acre for that little slice through your center of your city. Incidentally, we also grabbed the Pearl District. And interestingly about the Pearl District is you have some phenomenal values there from 8 million and 3 million up to 40 million. But on average, that's actually more productive than the Riverwalk District at about 11.5 million. So just to show you a couple of examples, that building with the 3 Wemby's building over there, to make it comparison to the Walmart's 13 million. If you had 7 of the building of the 117 Alamo, it would equal the entire value of the Walmart. Think about your land. Think about how your footprint on the land produces value for your community. So the other thing that we did, and we weren't able to get all of the data from your city. We got your stormwater and roads. If I'm showing you your revenue, can we add the cost to it? So going forward, this is an incomplete model because we don't have your water and sewer, so it's like an incomplete cake. But for anybody that's worked with financial officers in cities, I don't know if y'all know this, but when you talk to a city and for the counselor, you list your roads as assets. Whenever I talk to a financial officer, I'm like, my computer, right? My delivery van for my office or my office, those are assets. I can sell my van, my computer, and my office, right? Can San Antonio sell their roads to Austin? No. It's a liability. It's not an asset. So we need to look at it differently. So y'all have enough assets to take your roads. Well, it's actually your stormwater pipes can make it to Memphis. So your counselors have to rebuild stormwater pipes. They don't last forever. But think of that. You have to build a stormwater pipe to Memphis, but your roads are kind of crazy. They go all the way to Las Vegas by way of New York. So this is how much road you have. When you complain about a pothole, when you complain about anything going on in your city, realize the liability that your current council is dealing with. So this is when all of your roads got built. And you're sitting out here in 2020, but look what happened in 1940, in 1950. That's an insane amount of roads that you all built. Or you build your roads in 1900, those don't just fix themselves. They have to be rebuilt in 1950 when you built all that other stuff. So that's your first rebuild wave going through. You're going to have those same roads get rebuilt again in the 2000s. There's your second wave of rebuilding. And you're sitting out here and you're about to walk into a third wave. This stuff doesn't disappear. When you drive around American cities, city after city, and you see the pre-World War II city and how much wealth that we had and all this architecture and incredible stuff, and then you see how we suffer now, we've basically designed that into our financial system. Does that make sense? Y'all follow me? So roads last forever. Another joke some of you might get, but it's better than diamonds. Anyway, so you're currently in an operating deficit with your roads. You're supposed to be spending $430 million based on the roads that you have and your maintenance schedule. You're underperforming there. You're not alone in this. By the way, this is not a criticism of San Antonio. I have seen worse. This is the American system. This is what we have done to ourselves, okay? Out of our own ignorance, city after city, and what we think some fantasy infrastructure fairy is going to fix all of this stuff, right? It's just, we have to pay for it. So this is your stormwater system. It's a deficit too. This is floating the whole city into a lake and looking at the side view of the sunk cost of infrastructure with the money sitting on top of it. And this is what you're paying. This is what it costs. You net that. This is what it looks like as a net model. Just in those two infrastructures, you're at a net deficit of $200 million. When you go and ask for things from city council and they tell you no, it's not that they don't have the money, it's that we've overspent it on a system that we can't afford, period. She didn't pay me to say this, I'm just saying. This is what we see. So you're, just with two infrastructure systems, you're looking at about 24% of your city is net positive, and about 76% is net negative. This is the bottom view of the model. So again, I do have to say this is not complete, but this is a good nudge in the right direction to see this. Okay, I've gone through a lot of revenue stuff. Let's get into some equity real quick. This is your one thing that I mentioned, this touches upon equity. The average value per acre of the thing on the left is $400,000, and that's what you're getting out of that. When you look at the map, the Prospect Hill area is about that productive. Monte Vista is more productive, and you can just tell it from looking at the map. Neighborhoods that you would think or that we perceive as less valuable are actually more valuable than areas that we think are more productive. This is what this map can help you see. Southtown is a lot more productive. So you can see on the grade changes up there, Southtown's coming in at around 2 million compared to 400,000. So hopefully this map can help with those conversations. You also have a history of redlining. Everybody knows what redlining is in this community. Happened all across the country. In 1934, our federal government issued an edict for places to make these maps with 4 colors. Green was good, blue was okay, yellow was declining, red was considered hazardous. You had to measure your infiltration of immigrants or your African American, or in the labels in their documentation, the Negro population. So your map, you all know it or have seen it, you have this kind of bow tie east and west and a cup on the south, and you sort of started to send folks northward in this redlining document. You kept it in place from 1934 to 1968. So those neighborhoods that lived in the redlined areas had less protection of mortgage from the federal government. So it's no surprise when those neighborhoods start to fall apart. You essentially remove the wealth in those neighborhoods by design. And in your community, it was mostly with Hispanic populations and Black populations. You could go to Colorado and Denver. It was Italians, so watch out. I could take down your real estate. Yeah, look out for me. But as an Italian, I can change my name to Smith. I could pass as a white person. In Black neighborhoods, they can't do that. In neighborhoods of brown populations, you can't do that. So, but you all are at least having these conversations. So we went ahead and mapped a couple of neighborhoods. There's the Alamo Heights, where they restricted through deed restriction African Americans, but also people with tuberculosis couldn't live there, which was a code word for Latino populations. So here's a redline map in your model, and just kind of zooming in. So here's the stats. Right now, the value per acre, that value is being held in those neighborhoods that was initially forced through policy. Does that make sense? Y'all follow me? It's not a surprise to us that that value is still there, because that value was put in place and protected for 50 years in the green and blue neighborhoods. So here's how they stack up from a land value perspective. Does that all make sense? Again, this is just data points to keep these conversations going. So if I don't protect your properties, if you can't get the same access to capital, you can't fix your houses, this is the other thing that we see is the vacancy. Those neighborhoods that were redlined suffered a loss of real estate in your communities. So you're by far leading in the category of vacant land at 12%. Back to those numbers, you can see how the protected areas on a value perspective are lower than the areas that had more of the red and yellow at the higher. So the dirt was being valued higher in those neighborhoods. There's a good book that I'd recommend. It's called The Black Tax that covers a lot of this. These are policies that were put in place at the start of Reconstruction. in the early 1900s. So looking at the redlining and who's net positive and who's net negative, this is an interesting data point, that you're actually more productive in the former redline neighborhoods. You're more productive from a tax standpoint and more efficient on your infrastructure. Does that make sense? Y'all follow me? Is this too depressing? It's going to get worse. You all use appraisers in Texas. Assessors are in North Carolina. I'm going to go through this real fast. In North Carolina, my city and my county both adopted reparations, and I've lived there for 20 years. I know that they weren't going to do anything, so I volunteered my company to just do a pro bono analysis of our property assessment. So we had a red line map in Asheville. This is a race map of my county, and when you zoom into the city, there's this big hole right there. That's the Biltmore Estate. So the city sort of bends around the Biltmore Estate. Zooming into that area, this is where my friend Reggie lives in Shiloh, which is in the city of Asheville. It's a 54% black neighborhood. On the left is Biltmore Forest. At the time we did the analysis, I mean, sometimes you get lucky. Sydney Powell was living in Biltmore Forest. She's since moved to Dallas, so she's one of yours now. But we grabbed Sydney Powell's house and Reggie's house. So here's the two houses. And the land value per acre, this checks out. Her dirt is worth more than his dirt. That's cool. The building values per square foot, though, check these numbers out. So I sat down with my assessor, and I'm like, okay, I'm trained as an architect. Can you explain to me how Reggie's house is worth more than Sydney's house? I'm all ears. And he starts with his biases. He's like, well, she's got more square footage. I'm like, oh, it's like toilet paper. The more house I get, the cheaper. I'm like, come on, man. She's got 4 bathrooms. Reggie's got 1. So this means he's paying more taxes per acre to the county. But here's the kicker. We do our reassessments every 4 years by state statute. So somehow, for some reason, his house is way more desirable than Sydney's house. The value is increasing at 266%. Now, on her property card, she's renovated and he hasn't. So it gives with this. So while we were doing this analysis, there was a national study that came out from the University of Chicago that pretty much saw the same thing. They did a study of 90% of the counties across the country and found that less expensive houses were overvalued and higher valued houses were undervalued. And these are, I call them the J curve. It's basically like a J laying on its side. On the left of the chart is the lower decile of housing, and this is the wealthiest 10%. So the bottom 10%, top 10%. By constitution of pretty much every state in this country, that line should be uniform. Does that look uniform to you? No. Okay, so this is a house in Asheville that our computer software assessed it at $190,000. It sold that year for $150,000, so that's your proof in the marketplace. So be it not for that sale, that person would have overpaid 27% for their government. Y'all follow me? So that's called an overassessment. This is one where the computer got it right. So in defense of my assessor, there's 350,000 parcels in my community. They can't see everything. They have to use a computer system to do it. This one, the computer got it right. And here's one where the computer was off by 50%. So over, accurate, and under. This is my housing stock, stretching my housing stock from the poorest person on the left to the richest person on the right, making a 10% bucket of each of these. It should look like this. This is what my community looks like in the system. So basically we're, overcharging the bottom 40% and undercharging the top 60% of $1 million overcharge per year and $6 million undercharge for a net of $7 million that's in the system that's inequitous. So I gave this to my county because they adopted reparations. And I said, here, the first rule of reparations is do no harm. And the second is to fix it, right? So $7 million a year should go to our reparations committee, right? They gave they threw rose petals at my feet. They gave me a big key to the county. I'm kidding. They actually hit my company with a tax penalty, which is awesome. They think I'm going to shut up. I'm not. But, this is our state law. It says, what will somebody pay for the house, right? So here's a house in the South Side neighborhood. It was assessed at $300,000. It sold for $265,000. The assessor did a a reassessment down to 264. So that seems normal. That follows the law. Here's another one. So this is two low wealth neighborhoods. Let's go to a high wealth neighborhood. I have to change scales. And this is what it sold for, and this is what the computer assessed it at. So when I talked to my assessor, I said, look, I want to know what the computer did wrong. Why is it 50% off? But here's why I don't trust you. With the test score, this is what you reassessed it at. How is that fair? Here's another one. And another one. You know, if you think we're cherry picking, this is happening through the system, and there's biases in the system and how it operates. So that person on the far left and how many of their neighbors are paying full freight for that discount, well, it's about 5 folks are overpaying while 1 person is being discounted. That's what's going on in our community. And I'll I gotta start moving faster through this. This is my neighborhood, and notice how it bumps up in the middle of my neighborhood. And I asked my assessor what's going on with that, and he says there's a different tax neighborhood code inside your neighborhood. So these two properties side by side, this is the land value per acre change in 1 year. Why is the dirt moving so much more under that house versus this house? It's a 200% difference. And I'll tell you, as a city planner, this is a 1930s or 1920s streetcar suburb. The streetcar ran down Montford Avenue, which is right about here. All the wealthy white folks lived along the streetcar. All of their help lived in little pockets around. So those neighborhood code maps came in at the same time our redlining came in and impacted certain parts of the neighborhood differently than others. These are all put in with intention, and they work exactly as planned. So when you go back to Reggie's neighborhood, notice how the neighborhood codes are level, and we call that gentrification. It's not my fault as the assessor, it's your fault. You moved into that neighborhood and set the new price. You saw the law. Okay, that's cool. When you cross the street, notice how there's 2 transactions in the wealthiest neighborhood in the state, and no, it didn't affect the rest of that green neighborhood. How is that? It's actually worse than what I'm showing you. So this is, this is the 22-acre parcel with a 16,000 square foot house on top of it. Here's its tax in 2011. Its tax value was $4 million, and now in 2021 it's down to $3 million. Not only should this be a $25 million property, it's actually losing value. It's lost a quarter of its value in 10 years. So we did an over-under in that neighborhood. Again, richest neighborhood in the state. 55% of the houses are losing value for a net loss of $40 million in value. I'm starting right now. This is the definition of blight, people. We need to help these neighborhoods. The Chads and Brads of the world need our help. I'm joking. Definition of blight is loss of value, right? Inside joke. Anyway, so Reggie's neighborhood is overpaid $1.5 million a year, and Biltmore Forest is underpaid $4 million a year for a net loss of 111 school teachers in my community. Are you even asking these questions? Are you investigating this? So it's a reverse Robin Hood that's kind of by design in the system. And inside my red line neighborhoods, they're growing at 21% versus the green line neighborhoods at 5%. So this brings us to you. By constitution, you have the same constitution as ours, which is your taxation shall be uniform. So be aware of your constitution. You also have all your taxable value should be the market value. So this is a challenge for your assessor when you're in a non-disclosure state. This means your assessor can't see the transactions. I can give you so much more detail in North Carolina than what your assessor can see here. This is an open question for you all, but now you know that that's a problem. Talk to your state about it. Looking at your system, but also thank Sabor for giving us the ability to look at the MLS data and share this. And we've shared this with your appraiser district as well. But basically, here's the way that you should look. Here's what you actually look like. You're less messy than North Carolina. Your assessor is actually doing a better job than my assessor. But there's fairly equal in the middle, but you still see a dip in the bottom on the right for the wealthiest and a overcharge on the lowest in the system. So the way that that works out from a numbers standpoint for your over, accurate, and under, it's actually, I shouldn't say accurate. There's a bunch of people that are still inaccurate in the middle, but they're fairly flat in the model as far as a line goes, if you could see that. So over time, you can see how messy this is, but there's movement in that. Your assessors or your appraisers has a challenge with trying to figure out what's going on in the marketplace while those transactions happen, and also why the market changes. This is not a static object. We all remember the recession, right? So that's just what's going on in your community. To put the numbers on it, we'll just use the 2023. For the dollar paid in the poorest 10% of folks, the top folks in the top 10% paid 80 cents. Aren't big numbers, but they add up. So this is kind of doing the numbers in total and splitting that. There's an overcharge of 41 million, overvalue of 41 million, and an undervaluation of 550 million. When I talk to folks, actually I talked to folks in the Biltmore Forest neighborhood, and they've actually been pretty cool to talk with about it, because they're just like, well, we didn't know that everybody else wasn't getting a discount. Now, how would they know? They don't get in a room like this with people from different economic classes. So they aren't aware that it's not happening uniformly. So if they're getting 50% tax break, I should get a 50% tax break, right? So this is your discount in your homes, which translates into an overcharge of 113,000 and a discount of 1.5 million. Now this is just for the sales that we saw in this 1 year. So to scale that up, it's $1.6 million of inequity on 2.6% of the sales. So what's the remaining 97%? This is what the math problem looks like. We all remember junior high, right? 1.6 over 2.6. Let's solve for n. That's what this looks like. So it's about $61 million of loss in your system. This is not an insignificant amount of money to not interrogate. It's not as bad as my county on a per capita basis, but it's still a large number. It's about 508 school teachers, full-time salaries that are just not happening in your system. So just to close on this, I can't go through all of these charts. These are just kind of insane. But basically, when you look at the by census tract, percent white on the left, percent non-white on the right. If you're white, you tend to, in your census tracts, it tends to be more level than if you're non-white. This is for 2017, and we'll just go through all the different years up until 2023. So you can see that it's a moving line, but it tends to benefit white populations until you hit this year of 2023, then you see this dip. But on average, over the last 7 years, it's been more of a problem for non-white populations. When you go by income, from the poorest on the left to the highest on the right, and do the same years, the poorest folks in 2017 were getting a bigger discount, and that slowly changed over time to where we are today. And again, so they're not static, but when you look at all of them combined, when you just look at 2023, if you're white, you tend to get a bigger discount, and if you're wealthy, you tend to get a better discount. But as you saw, these things change over time, but this is the data that you have now, so you know. And then just to close with a couple of examples on this, we grabbed 2 zip codes, the Alamo Heights neighborhood, basically, and the South Side neighborhood. The South Side neighborhood wasn't fully redlined. There was a tip of redlining. And then this is the closing stats. It tends to be percent more white in Alamo Heights versus South Side, tends to be more Hispanic. 60% white in Alamo Heights, 88% Hispanic on the South Side. When you look at the over-under, who's over-assessed and under-assessed, you tend to have, if you look at the red and the green is under-assessed and red is over-assessed. There are folks that are over-assessed in Alamo Heights, about 25%. But when you look at the South Side, it's more than double that, or almost double that at 48%. When you look at the under-assessed in the South Side, it's about half or less than half what Alamo Heights are. So I'm not calling the system racist. I'm saying there are racial and class implications on the system that you have in place. So, and it's a discount of, you're averaging about 0.98% tax on the Alamo Heights, while you're about 12 points higher in Southside. So just to close on this, these are the stats, and this is a sheet that was in the newspaper. But basically, this is the roll-up of those two parcels or discounts. I'm just going to fly through Dallas. Dallas is actually worse than you guys by far. I'm just going to actually jump ahead because I'm running out of time here. But yeah, you guys are doing way better than Dallas, and also Fort Worth. So just to close, I'm putting this all out there because I think we all need to have a big adult conversation about how we run cities and how we tax things, how we pay for things. When I bought this phone, don't you think that Apple figured out how much the glass cost and the metal? Of course. Why aren't we doing this with cities? Why are we operating with such a weird policy of taxation? If we know that it's unfair, why don't we change it? So if I can't tell what's going on in the soundboard, like our parent company has a nightclub, when there's feedback on the stage, there's somebody that turns a knob and we get rid of the feedback. We can't figure out our own camera systems, our own systems of software for our assessment systems to do this as accurately. Why? So I don't know if you know this, but in New York, the Supreme Court took the city of New York City to court and found this, or somebody sued them and took them to the state court. Nearly everyone, this is from the Supreme Court, nearly everyone agrees that the property tax system is inequitable, opaque, and puts a burden on low-income people. This isn't just in the South. The system is unfair. Several mayors have unsuccessfully pledged to mend it, resulting in racial and economic disparities. So politicians know that this is a problem. They just don't know how to fix it, right? By the way, this is last year in New York. It was also 1873 in New York when the state had the similar findings that the system is now regarded, taxation is unequal, unjust, and oppressive. By the way, I'm such a nerd, I bought a textbook from 1895. I open up my thumb to this page, and look at this one. The property tax system is administered as beyond all doubt one of the worst tax systems in the civilized world. It puts a premium on dishonesty, debauches the public conscience. It reduces deception to a system. How many of us have friends that, and maybe some of us in this room, have done improvements on their property without pulling a permit, right? Did you send a card to the assessor saying, I just fixed my house? It makes us be cheaters. And it doesn't work for folks. So I just want to put that out there to think about. By the way, while we were doing the work, one of my staff took the test to be an assessor, and I kid you not, this was a screenshot he sent me from the test. It's the same 4 colors. That means the same 4 things as redlining. So I called Larry and I was like, dude, you need to change the test. But to his credit, he's like, yeah, we got to get that out of here. So it just, why do we do this? Anyway, you can't change the system until it is faced. And hopefully I brought enough information forward to you to give you some idea of what's out there. And I'm here facing the system. So thanks.